This video is a part of Team Duo's submission to Melbourne Datathon Challenge A. So can electricity demand tell us anything about COVID-19? Let's find out. To understand the change, let's look at the change in electricity demand. This graph shows the change in predicted and actual values of electricity demand during COVID period in Victoria and NSW. To showcase this change, in Victoria we have used the timeline during stage 4 lockdown, and in NSW we have used stage 2 lockdown period. Both graphs shows the reduction in electricity demand for majority of the days during COVID-19. Our major aim is to understand the reason for these changes, which can help us to further improve the existing forecast models, thereby helping operators and policymakers in short-term planning. We found that the significant reduction in electricity demand during this period is a direct result of factors related to COVID-19, which includes number of COVID-19 cases, degree of social distancing, and level of commercial activity in the region. To find this, let's start looking at the reasons causing this change. Because of the government restrictions, many people have now started working from home. Due to this, there is a major increase in the demand of electricity from residential space. However, this change at many regions is offset by the decrease in electricity demand from industrial and commercial activities. Further, there is also an increase in the growth observed in the PV installations in many residential places. This uncertainty due to PV installations can be accounted by using the PV installation rate. However, no data is available which can quantify the impact of this pandemic. To analyze this, we propose a cross-domain analysis which integrate the existing electricity demand dataset with factors directly related to public health such as COVID-19 cases, government restrictions, a cause of social distancing, and retail activity, a significant contributor to the demand of electricity. For retail activity, we have used retail visit dataset made available from Google and obtained from GPS locations of the people. For social distancing, we have used the location dataset from Facebook, which represents the mobility of the people during COVID-19. Further, for public health related information, we are using COVID-19 confirmed cases dataset. Let's start looking at the dashboard. To understand the impact, we have performed our analysis on two COVID hotspots in Australia, Victoria and NSW. Let's start looking what's happening in Victoria. This graph here shows the variation in time scales of the different factors to change in electricity demand. The influencing factors exhibit very different temporal dynamics. Here in Victoria, the graph shows a wide variation in the time scales of different factors. These factors are confirmed cases, stay-at-home population, and retail activity. The electricity demand shows a delayed reduction with respect to the number of COVID-19 cases in comparison to retail activity. This says that COVID-19 cases has an indirect influence on the change in electricity demand. Next, we will look at the retail activity versus electricity demand. Looking at the retail activity, the mobility in the retail sector has the earliest response in terms of rate of change, slowly dropping from late June 2020 and continuing to go down until late August 2020. This is mainly the result from early responses of consumers to the emerging pandemic. Next, the plot which shows the trace of evolution of daily new confirmed cases and social distancing in Victoria, and the associated rate of change of reduction in electricity demand. A slight rebound in electricity demand may be correlated with the partial opening of the economy and ease of restrictions as observed in June 2020 to first week of August. Further, this is the variance decomposition graph which shows the contribution of each of the factors to the change in electricity demand. We can see that the temperature has a very least contribution during COVID-19 period, while mobility score, which is a measure of social distancing, shows much higher contribution to the change in electricity demand. Let's now look at the impulse response analysis, which describe the evolution of reduction in electricity demand that result from a unit increase or decrease in retail activity. We found that 1% in decrease in retail activity results in a 0.78% reduction in electricity demand. Further, this also shows that the electricity demand is typically most sensitive to the change in mobility in the retail activity. However, the change is very less sensitive to the number of COVID 19 cases. Let's now look at the trend in NSW. NSW, in comparison to Victoria, has been very dynamic in terms of people behavior, with restrictions not as stringent as in Victoria. But still, we saw high sensitivity to the retail activity. Let's look at the forecast for variance decomposition analysis, which shows high contribution of COVID 19 confirmed cases in comparison to NSW. But in impulse response analysis, retail activity is more sensitive to the change over confirmed cases. Overall, we see that the number of COVID 19 cases in both Victoria and NSW may not showcase a direct influence of the change in electricity demand. Thus, we see that the high proportion in various decomposition does not mean the high strong influence to the change in electricity demand. This indicates that both electricity decomposition and impulse response are necessary to infer the influence on change. Our finding quantify the dynamics of the interplay between COVID-19 related factors influencing the electricity demand across Victoria and NSW. The data hub can allow the researchers to conduct cross-domain analysis on the electricity sector during and after this global pandemic. Also, the power system operators can leverage this analysis for short-term planning and operation of their grid. Further, this data hub can also be used by the policymakers to prepare a short-term forecast on the economic impact of COVID-19, including GDP growth rate and the level of commercial activity in the region. For further interest, we have provided the link to the dashboard. Thank you.